I have another porcupine ejaculation story.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hello, 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 and welcome back to the podcast that's kind of another different podcast today, the Rossifari podcast. That was weird. Many of the things I say there are weird, though, so that's okay. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited that we are doing a pod swap today. You see, it turns out that there is a former zookeeper that now runs a podcast called Weird Animal Facts Explicit, because it's all like explicit and stuff. And she shares weird animal facts. I guess that was kind of in the title. I didn't really have to say that. But anyway, when I found out about that podcast and checked it out, I thought that a lot of the humor in it was kind of similar to mine. And the fact that the host is a former zookeeper meant that we might make a good fit for each other's podcasts. So today I am bringing you my interview with Deidre Ousterhout, who is a former zookeeper and currently the podcast host that I just told you about. And we're going to get into a lot of really cool stuff. We're going to talk about her podcast and share what her mission and the story of that is. But we're also going to do the normal deep dive into the career. We're going to talk about her time as an intern, her time at Living Desert in California, which is an amazing facility that we haven't really gotten to talk about on the podcast yet. So I'm excited for you to hear some of that. And her time at Zoo Atlanta. You'll even get to hear a really cool alligator training story. Now, as I mentioned, Deidre's podcast is explicit. It is made for adults. And this one is not necessarily that, although we get a little naughty from time to time. And so this episode is done in the spirit of Rossifari. There's no cursing or anything like that going on. I might say HE double hockey sticks one, something like that. I don't know. But it goes off the rails a little bit. We get a little crazy. We have a little fun. And as you heard in the preview, there may be some, naughtier stories, all in the spirit of education and humor and all good stuff, though. So I'm really excited to share all of those with you. Also, in her time at these various zoos, Deidre wrote a lot of the shows that were presented to audiences to teach education and conservation. So we talk a little bit about what that looks like, both from a writing standpoint and from a collaborating with others in the zoo standpoint. Oh, and we laugh a lot. This one, did I mention it goes off the rails? It goes a little off the rails. Now, I mentioned that Deidre's podcast, along with being explicit, shares weird animal facts. And so this is a true pod swap. When you are done listening to this episode, and only when you are done listening to this episode, you can head on over on the same app you're listening on now to Weird Animal Facts Explicit, and you will find a red panda themed episode released today featuring yours truly as a guest. It was really fun going on Deidre's podcast and sharing some weird animal facts about red pandas. Although I will tell you, it stayed true to her podcast and we got a little explicit. So if you want to hear your sweet animal buddy John dropping F-bombs and making naughty jokes, then head on over to Deidre's podcast and you'll hear just that. But before you hear my interview on her podcast or her interview on mine, you get to hear an ad. Today's episode is brought to you by Daydreamers Studios. Do you have stories and expertise to share with the world? Have you ever thought about starting your own podcasts? There's no better time to start than now with the help of a trusted production partner. Daydreamer Studios is a full-service production company that takes all the stress off your plate. You can focus on creating engaging content while they focus on recording, editing, audio engineering, hosting, and publishing on 22 platforms. Log into the advanced remote system with one click, and the Daydreamer team will be on the other end, ready for you to record everything you have to say. Owned and operated by Daydreamer Network, Daydreamer Studios continues on the company's mission to empower storytellers of all kinds by making podcasting accessible to all. For more information and current promotions, visit daydreamernetwork.com/studios. So without further ado, here is my interview with Deidre Ousterhout of the Weird Animal Facts Explicit podcast. Tell me who you are.
My name is Deidre Ousterhout, and I am the host of Weird Animal Facts Explicit podcast.
Yeah, you are.
Podcast for adults.
Yes, for adults with childlike humor, which is why we're going to have such a great conversation, because that's us too. So you started out before the podcast. You have been a keeper, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for about a decade.
Yeah. So I want to get to some of those stories, but let's talk about the pod. Let's start off. So what made you decide to do a podcast?
Well, it actually, as many things, started over the last few years with COVID. I actually was an ambassador animal keeper, so basically any of the education animals, talking to guests was really my passion. And then when COVID came, that kind of hit me pretty hard, because the main reason I got into zookeeping is to educate people. So with that, that year when COVID hit, I actually had written our brand new show, our kids show, had everything designed, and we had the set all organized, everything was ready to go, and then COVID. And I was having a hard time because, like, part of my release, because, everyone has, like, stressor release, whether it's, like, running, playing video games. Mine was, like, educating and talking to people, and I wasn't able to do that. And so with the zoo, I worked really hard with PR, like, let's do videos, let's do more. And, well, they only did a little bit. And as an ambassador keeper, I thought we should do even more. And I kind of felt like I was the only one doing it, like really, really trying to do it. But again, that's what made me feel good. Other people needed other things, but I needed to talk to people. And so we did some videos here and there. But then one of the issues with the videos wasn't an issue. It was more something that bugged me, is like I had to go through so many channels because I was a keeper 3. So I had to go through my lead keeper, had to go through my curator, had to go through sometimes their curator and PR. So I had like at least 4 different people I had to jump through, like, is this approved? Is this approved? And it got, it was kind of frustrating at times. And then
you were talking to another podcast host who interviews people at zoos.
Oh, you get the whole PR.
Tell you about some of the hoops that I have had to jump through. It is amazing. I mean, you're right. Especially sometimes what happens is I'll meet a keeper, like on Insta or, heaven forbid, in person, and they'll be interested in doing the podcast. And so that's awesome. But like you said, they're like a keeper 3. So then they've got to run it by their lead keeper, who then wants to know why I don't want to interview their keeper 1. And then that person needs to take it to PR, and PR has 2 people. And then in some of the bigger zoos, there's a legal team that needs to look at, paperwork about it. And it is. And the best part about it for me is that every single zoo has a different policy. If there was like a zoo PR policy, I'd be golden. I'd have my little checklist and I do the thing. But
that's not a thing, especially at AZA.
I know. I have literally gotten emails from PR people, and luckily they've all been really nice. But saying like, John, you did the wrong thing here, this. And there was one time that I literally got 2 emails in the same day, one of which was, you absolutely need to go through the PR team first. Never talk to a keeper until you have spoken to the PR team. And the other one was, you need to talk to the keeper, work it out with them, and then they need to bring it to the PR team. And they were both
who's going to be offended by what?
And they were both like mildly annoyed with me, and I'm good with people, and I can be sweet, and I was able to charm my way out of all of it. But I literally had these 2 emails sitting back to back, and I was like, maybe I should just do my own podcast where I talk to myself every week.
Yeah, right? Yeah, and that's really what why I kind of started the podcast. But also, like I said, it was COVID, And usually, like, I was talking about stress release. It was not just like educating people, but it was also like my stress release was playing soccer on a team, traveling. I wasn't able to do any of this stuff. And so I started getting really stressed. And I'm like, and I had this like weird epiphany. I was like, I can just do this instead. I can just do a podcast. I don't have to drop my zoo's name at all. And I can just say what I want, educate the people in the way I feel is appropriate. I don't have to deal with all the political correctness of the zoo world.
There's a reason you have explicit in the title.
Yes, and I hope that's very clear to people. I try to make it very clear. All I need is like one person like, my kid watched this, and I'm like, or listen to this, and I'm like, well, it says explicit, not my fault, I'm sorry. At least they learned something. That's the overall good point.
Yes. It's interesting that you say that, though, with the whole COVID release thing, because, I'm a drummer, and I not only is that my work, but that is my, like you said, that's my physical, pounding the snot out of the drums. There is
it makes you feel real good.
Better. Oh man, yeah. No, it is. I'm a pretty chill person overall, but I think I'm mostly a chill person because I'm hitting the drums so regularly,
Yeah.
And my favorite part about being a musician is collaboration. I'm not super into drum solos. I'm not super into all of that kind of stuff. I can do it, and if an audience likes it, cool. But like, it's supporting singers and guitarists and pianists and all that really I feel cool about. When I take someone's solo to the next level, or someone makes a mistake and I catch it and fix it for them from behind the drums, those are the moments where I'm like, oh. And so even though I could still kind of play my acoustic drums at home alone, as long as it wasn't so much that my neighbor would complain, COVID was rough for all of that.
Yeah.
And
for everyone too. Like,
oh yeah.
Even like the zoo I worked at, I was at Zoo Atlanta when COVID hit, and it was, when the zoo closed, it was like, whoa. It was so weird because like only like the animal staff was there. Like everyone else was gone. And it was just like, so everyone had their own stuff going on and had to find a new way to release all this stress and whatever else you needed to feel good about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So, so let's talk about the podcast some more. Tell me, like, how's it going? Are you getting some traction? Are people seeming to dig it?
I hope so. I don't have a whole, I feel like every podcaster is like, I don't have as many people as I want. You always want to get more listeners, reach more people. But the people who listen are, they're dedicated listeners, and I love them. And they're always like commenting on all my Instagrams. And actually, I recently started a TikTok, which when I did, I felt very, very old.
Yes, that is why I do not keep up my TikTok. I have a Rossifari pod TikTok, but I go there and it's 16-year-old girls doing dances that I don't understand to songs that I don't understand and showing their booties, and then I'm like, cool, I'm gonna get off this app now, thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely for a younger crowd. Well, I remember when I was researching how to like, reach more people with like the podcast, and like how to like, I asked some people at work as I put my reading glasses on. I was like, what's Reddit? How do hashtags work? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so old right now. These girls weren't that much younger than me, but like I think I knew a little bit more than them. But back to the TikTok, I put like a couple of videos up about if humans acted like animals, and it was about like a tarantula, their mating strategy. And after that, I actually got a lot more listens on my podcast. So I'm learning how to utilize social media. And I hate social media. Nice.
Yeah, no, I get that. Insta is my baby, and I like it. You have
a nice Instagram page. All your pictures are so amazing. You have a lot of red panda, which I understand because they're stinking cute. But
I have. Lately, I've been. I go through phases where I'm like, no more than one red panda a week, and then when I'm having a rougher time or just whatever, suddenly you'll find like 4 or 5 in a week, and I'm like finding lame excuses to sneak an extra panda on and be like, no, this is here because it slightly relates.
Are your fans ever like, if you're like not stopped putting red pandas out for a little while. Like, where are the red pandas?
Oh yeah, I've gotten complaints. I literally have gotten complaints from people that, the funny thing is, they're not like podcast people. They're, because it started as just an Instagram. I was just using it for my zoo photos, and then I started using that to try to engage with people in the community and do some fundraising, and then I started the podcast. And people who have been following me for years, yeah, if I and I always do, every Monday is a red panda pick. I call it my Red Panda Monday.
Love it.
And it's a panda pick and a encouraging message along with a bad pun. It's pretty great. But if I ever go like 2 weeks without putting up a panda other than on Mondays, I start to get complaints. I literally do, from people that I don't even know. They're not the people I've engaged with or anything. And it's just like, hey man, haven't seen any pandas in a while. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I think, all right, cool. All right. But yeah, it's really interesting, the social media thing, and podcasts. I've been experimenting with it a lot, and there's no right answer. There are times that I will promote the hell out of an episode, and it will be, I mean, all of my episodes get roughly the same number of listens over the same number of time. It's pretty consistent, but some of my lowest listened to are the ones that were promoted by a person like my guest, some of whom have quite the following, much larger than mine. And they'll promote him, and I'll promote him multiple times, and nothing comes of it. And other ones, my most listened to episode is Caitlin Bach from PASA. And PASA is the Pan-African Sanctuary Alliance, which is like a great ape conservation organization. Not super well known compared to a lot of other things, like zoos and stuff. Not a ton of followers. To my memory, PASA didn't promote the episode. Caitlin promoted it, but she's one of those more private people who has like 300 followers on Instagram. And
that's still a lot for an independent. That's more than me.
It's solid. It's solid. Yeah. And then on top of that, she promoted it once, and I promoted it once, and it is my most listened to episode by like a lot, like 10% more than any other listen. Meanwhile, when you go back to like my early episodes that are all pretty, like I said, about the same number of listens overall, over time, the one, and I'm not going to say who it is, I'm not going to be mean, but the person who has by far the least numbers has a huge internet following, has way more than I would have, than I can dream of having right now. Yeah. And promoted the hell out of it, and so did I. And for whatever reason, it just didn't click. And it is still, other than like my most recent that just haven't caught up yet, it is my least listened to episode. And whenever I go back and look at my stats, I'm like, how?
I know, it's so weird. I have most listened ones are like the more, because it's about animals. Like the panda has a lot of listens, dolphin has a lot of listens, obviously. But then like I had one, it was the sea star. And I forgot what I did with it, because I did 2 animals per episode. That one all of a sudden like skyrocketed, and I was like, "What? Why is this one so high?" Like I didn't even like really do any like social media for it. And I don't know if you can hear my dogs right now.
Yes.
They're wrestling.
Yes, okay, that's adorable.
That's what they're doing.
I mean, what's
Dolly
an animal podcast without animals?
Without some animals.
What did you say their names were?
Dolly and Ron.
Nice. That's cute. Very cute.
Yeah. All right. Shh. Working now, dog.
All right, so we have spent a long time nerding out about podcast stuff, and
yes.
Hopefully I still have some listeners. But I do think it's cool. I think people like to listen to, like, get into the weeds a little bit about something that they like. But enough of that crap. Let's get to aminals. So tell me about like what made you want to become a keeper, and what steps did you take to start that career? Yeah,
well, actually, I can actually pinpoint this to when I was in preschool. I grew up in Silverton, Oregon. It's a very tiny town. You have to like get lost kind of to get to this town. It's not off the freeway. But in preschool, it was Sunshine Preschool. There was Teacher Terry, and Teacher Terry worked at the Humane Society. And because of that, she would bring like teachings of how to treat animals, how to greet a dog, how to respect them. And I know from that moment, like that's what like sparked my love for animals. And what's crazy though, Teacher Terry is actually my brother-in-law's great aunt.
Whoa, all right.
That's cool. How small my little town is, but and I actually got to tell her at my sister's wedding. I was like, Teacher Terry, you won't believe this. I'm a zookeeper because of you. So that was actually like really exciting. And then I also, this other thing, I don't remember this. My dad remembers this. In Oregon, there's the wildlife safari, which is like where a lot of cheetahs, they have a lot of cheetahs there, basically. And I guess this is how my dad tells me. He said they had a show with a cheetah, and they had a cheetah up there on the stage. And my dad said, I turned to him and I said, that's what I want to do. And I don't remember this at all. But I'm like, okay, I believe you, Dad, because my dad doesn't lie. And so even as a kid, I always wanted to work with big cats. That was like my dream. And then I went to school. I did a community college in Oregon, but I really wanted to go to Maine. There's this tiny environmental college up in Maine called Unity, and it's called America's Environmental College. And this college is actually it was great for what I needed, because I came from a small town. This was a small college, and to describe this college, half of the college was like redneck, the other half was like hippie. And I was just like random jock in the middle.
Wait, what the hell? I'm picturing lots of blood on a Saturday night, but whatever.
No, I guess it was kind of like split through the campus. But I mean, they got along. They were like respectable, but you could tell there was still like the very conservative and the very liberal. Just because like half of the degrees were like conservation law enforcement, and the other half was adventure education. And then there were like, it was a new degree that mine was. It was captive wildlife care and education. Big mouthful. But that's what I got my degree in. And then while I was in school, part of graduating, you had to do internships. And these are unpaid internships, which I don't know.
The best kind, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you've talked about it here on your podcast with some of your guests, but you don't get paid to do interns. But I did 2 internships. The first one was back in Oregon at the High Desert Museum. And this is actually where my grandparents live, in this little tiny town, Bend, Oregon. Not tiny, I guess it's kind of bigger. But that, because I wanted to work with cats, like I said earlier. But this was with the Ambassador Animal Department. And, I fell in love with it. So it's the High Desert Museum. So they have animals of the high desert that are local to Bend, Oregon. So they had things like porcupines, who are amazing, skunks, all the birds of prey you can imagine that are around there, great horned owl, red-tailed hawk, Harris's hawk, barn. I could keep going on and on, because I love these animals. So they have chuckwallas. Oh, I'm getting carried away because I love it. And like that was when I was like, this is what I want to do. When my brain just switched. I'm like, I want to educate people. I want to work with these small animals who can't murder me and educate people. And then my other internship that I did was completely different. And it was at Sea Life Park in Hawaii, which was all with dolphins.
Oh, nice.
Well, see, people always say that, but I'm like, well, that's when I learned I didn't want to work with dolphins.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I would still imagine it was cool to be there in freaking Hawaii with dolphins.
Great. My tan was amazing, except for the fact that I always wore like rash guard. So it was just like a t-shirt tan and short tan, but the parts that was tan was very tan. So I looked very good.
I had a very sexy farmer's tan. All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Check out the new nature podcast that everyone is talking about, Birds of a Feather Talk Together. If you like Radiolab or Planet Earth, you'll love Birds of a Feather Talk Together. Escape from the daily grind into the world of birds. 2 experts and 2 amateurs talk about a different species every week. Recently, we talked about the osprey, burrowing owls, roadrunners, pigeons, giant hummingbirds, house wrens, sandhill cranes, and so many more. We have a lot of fun every week. Learn more about the incredible birds around you and some that you didn't know existed. Birds of a Feather Talk Together. You're going to like these birds. I guarantee it.
Well, they also had, they had dolphins there, and they had a false killer whale, sea lions. They had monk seals, and they also had Humboldt penguins, which I love the penguins so much. But actually, like I said, I learned I didn't want to work with dolphins there. And I think it was mainly because this wasn't like an AZA place. It was mainly people would come to swim with dolphins. And so that's what they did. And I got upset because the trainers who were training the dolphins, like they love the animals, but they didn't have requirements to teach people And I'm like, here you have these people who make a lot of money because they can afford to do this encounter with these dolphins, but you're not going to tell them why they should give their money to a good cause. It was just like, here's my money, let me swim. And that was it. And I'm like, you have this opportunity, use it. And that's what frustrated me about that. But also, dolphins, they are sinister. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that video of that guy like paddleboarding, and all of a sudden those dolphins come up, and you can tell that dolphin, he's like, I'm gonna take this guy out. They know what they're doing. These guys are sneaky.
Oh yeah, very smart animals.
Yes, they're smiling, but like an evil smile.
The question is it evil or did that dude deserve it? Because most people I know deserve it, to be fair.
I know, he looked like he was just chilling out. But I actually, this is a story I actually told on my podcast. During this internship, one of the girls who I worked with, she was, there's like little platforms, looks like walking a plank from pool to pool. She was walking along that. And when I told her my podcast is that she slipped and fell in the water. And the trainers like stopped everything doing, rushed over, and the dolphin responded really quick to them. But what really happened, because Rachel told me this later, she's like, no, he actually pushed me in the water. He ran into the fence and she fell in. And I was like, what? That would have made my podcast episode so much better.
That's amazing.
So but I mean, he didn't hurt her at all. Like,
no, right. I'm sure it was done in like a playful way because he could have if he wanted to.
Yeah.
Like,
but
I'm not even saying that as an innocent thing,
the response time of the trainers was just so fast that I was like, he could have murdered her, but he didn't. He didn't. She's perfectly fine and wonderful in every way. It's just they could.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to remember at all times when dealing with animals that, like, they're animals, you know? I always like to point out I have one scar from all of my interactions with animals, and it's from a red panda. And most people would be shocked by that fact, but a red panda is the one that has left a scar. But a lot of times when I meet animals and people listening hear the cute little audio of it and love it, either things have happened where, you know, occasionally where I just, a little cut, a little scratch, whatever. Or a lot of the times, I'm fine and nothing happens, but I get a very severe talking to beforehand and a reminder like, John, we're letting you do this, but this is not an ambassador animal that you're meeting. They're not trained for this. Don't sue us if something happens. I have to agree to that a lot. Yeah.
And the thing is too about all the keepers, trainers, anyone who works with animals, they understand the animals so well that they're not going to put someone like you who's not a zookeeper into a situation where you could potentially get hurt. They obviously have faith in the animal and the relationship with that animal that they can protect you, I guess, for lack of better terms.
I think what happens is too, a lot of them get to know me a little bit, and over the course of the interview and everything, realize
they know you're not going to be an idiot about it.
Well, and that I will respect them. Because I have had situations where, nothing's going off the rails, but you could start to tell, hell, even I could start to tell the animal's behavior is getting a little, and it's instantly, okay, John, I need you to take 3 steps back and do not look at the animal right now, or I need you to do this or that. And I do. I'm not going to be the idiot that's like, no, I'm just, it's fine. And that has been helpful, but I think that's, I talk to a lot of fans that are like, oh, it's so cool that you get to do all this stuff. I wish I could do that stuff. And it's yeah, you do. But you also, there's a reason that general public doesn't get to do stuff, but I've gotten to because of the podcast,
Yeah, you're being respectful. And that's that's all that any person who works with animals or even just with nature wants. They want you to respect it. That's it. I mean, just I want you to respect me. You want me to respect you. It's just, there needs to be more respect in the world.
There really does. It's actually one of my big pet peeves, even just the amount of times that, someone will cut you off and then flick you off. Or the other day.
I live in Atlanta. I know what it's like. People you put your blinker on. They're like, oh, no way. They speed up and then they flip you off. I'm like, I put my blinker on, sir. Yeah.
It's not actually your road. Yeah. Just the other day, a dude literally just stopped in the middle of the road to go put mail in a mailbox, and there was a parking spot 50 feet in front of him, and he got out, and I rolled down my window, and I didn't yell, I wasn't rude, but I was just like, you realize there's parking right there, right? And he goes, yeah, I do. And I was like, wow, okay. You're blocking traffic. It literally could have blocked the intersection the way that.
It's a good thing you were nice about it, because there's some people who would have yelled and that would have escalated it.
Yeah, no, I don't. Like you said, we need more
there.
respect in the world, and I believe that. And I try really hard to be that guy, although sometimes people, man.
Well, that's why those zookeepers let you in. I mean, most people at the zoo are so nice and so respectful, and like, the people at the zoo, it's like your second family.
Yeah.
It's a small little community, which I'm sure you've gotten to know by now. And everyone's just so kind and welcoming of everyone. It's like your brother, your sister, your aunt. It's just warm. It's a warm place.
Absolutely. So, okay. So after the schooling and the internship and all of that, where was the first real job?
The first real job was Tophus Park Zoo, which they've changed their name to Idaho Falls Zoo.
Yes.
So yeah, it was, but I was the seasonal animal show assistant. And this was like, oh, I love this because, well, my dad's a drama teacher, so I grew up with like theater as a background, and both my parents are like educators and teachers. And so like, I'm like, oh, I get to work with animals and I get to do shows. This is fantastic. So it's everything I wanted. And it was a small zoo. And the best part about small zoos, like when you're working there, is that you do everything. So you get to learn how to train animals, kind of on your own, so to speak, too. I also like kind of built a fence. Never built a fence before. I worked with all sorts of animals, and I got to train like zoo teams and volunteers. And I had to do everything from, like I said, building a fence, putting like pigeon wire up on something. You're doing everything. But it was a seasonal job. But it was a great job. It was a great starting job right out of college. And it was on the West Coast. So I've hopped around a bit if you keeping track of all the states I've lived at. So I was there for 2 summers.
I have to interrupt you for just a second.
Yeah.
You said Idaho, right?
Idaho, yeah.
West Coast, huh?
I love the West Coast. I grew up in Oregon.
Don't get me wrong. I love the West Coast. I spend as much time in California as I possibly can. I've just never heard anyone refer to Idaho as the West Coast before, that far over.
I mean, it's not on the coast, but compared to where I'm in Atlanta, Georgia right now.
Fair.
And I went to school in Maine. So like that's more West Coast than where I'm at now. So.
That's fair. I just had to bust your chops a little bit because I'm like, I have spent, a couple of days playing in Idaho, and I don't
there's
remember
not much
any
going
coastline.
on in Idaho. So I mean, that was courteous.
That's fair. So go ahead and tell me, like, what kind of animals were you working with there at the now Idaho Falls Zoo? All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Hi, this is Kathy Hill from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. We're all about restoration projects in progress this season on One Lagoon, One Voice. Learn about the great strides the lagoon community is taking to restore and protect the Indian River Lagoon. Each week, we dive deep into discussions with scientists, resource managers, and nonprofit leaders to explore lagoon issues and solutions. From oyster reefs to clam restoration, algae blooms to muck, you'll learn all about the projects we're tackling to bring the Indian River Lagoon back to health. Click the link in the show notes to follow One Lagoon, One Voice, learn about the IRL Council, and explore our unique lagoon.
Yeah, let's see. I got to train an auger buzzard, and it's actually a hawk from Africa. So it's like a red-tailed hawk, but from Africa. But they call them buzzards instead of hawks.
Cool.
So I got to train, I forgot its name, but I got to train that. Harris's hawk. Oh, yeah, I love that Harris's hawk. I think his name was Hunter. He was really cool. He just sat in your glove perfectly. We didn't have a kennel. I had to walk him down to the vet one day, and it was raining, and then we didn't have a kennel because, it's a small zoo, but I had him a rain jacket, and he was so chill. I was just able to put the rain jacket over top his head, and he was like, whatever, man.
That's awesome.
And then there was a farm too, so we had like pigs. Was it a llama or alpaca? Don't quite remember. But there's also all those small reptiles. Oh, I love snakes so much. We had milk snakes, a sandbow, I believe. Chuckwallas. I love chuckwallas.
Yeah, chuckwallas are really cool.
Yeah. And I can't remember all the animals because that was like more than a decade ago now.
Sure.
But it was great. I got to work with all these different animals and write shows and do shows and perform them. And Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So where to after that?
Then I didn't go. I stayed. This time I was really on the West Coast. I went to California.
Okay, now we're in the West Coast. Good.
Yes.
Good.
And this was the Living Desert. Have you been there?
I love the Living Desert. And I'm going back soon.
Oh, they have that new habitat. Like when I left, they were just talking about putting in their new, the new Australian and rhino habitat. And I haven't been there since, but like, they've come so far. They were already like they were always voted one of the top prettiest zoos. And it's because of the desert landscape. And,
yeah, it's insane.
And if you don't know the desert, you should go to the Living Desert. It will introduce you to the desert. It's like the Mojave Desert. And they have their garden department is amazing. Like it's a botanical garden too. And it's just, I love desert plants and desert animals too. So anyways, back to my story after I stopped raving about the Living Deserts. I got hired for a new position, and it was the outreach coordinator. So it was called Wildlife on Wheels. So I ran the Zoomobile program. And so I actually got hired to start the program, design the program, run anything that had to do with the Zoomobile. That was me, and kind of only me. But it was fantastic because I was in the animal department, but I also worked hand in hand with education. Like my office was in the education department, but I was part of ambassadors. So I was like the only one working with like our Porcupine, Bramble, who his parents came from High Desert Museum where I interned at. So I was like, oh my gosh, you're like my baby. But I love that Porcupine.
Porcupines are great, by the way. If anyone who's listening gets a chance to do an animal encounter with the porcupine, it might seem like why meet a rodent or whatever, but oh man, they are cool and personable and fun to feed. And
I actually have a story about Mr. Bramble.
Well, let's hear it.
So, like I said, I was the only one working with him, really. I mean, there are other keepers working with him, but he was brought to the Living Desert to go on Zoomobiles. And so I was his primary keeper. And so I trained him to sit on a little table and do some behaviors like he could wave and spin around, and he'd just sit there looking pretty. But because I was his only trainer, he liked me a lot. And he was also trained to step up onto gloves. And so their bellies don't have quills on them. Their back part do. And their back part their quills there have little spikes on them that can get stuck on you sometimes. Anyways, so that's why we could ask him to step up without it hurting us. So to have him step up, I would put my gloved hands out, and he'd step up. I give him a little treat, and he'd sit there perfectly because he was so well behaved. And so one time we were at the Marriott because we had this program with the Marriott, and so we'd go to this fancy resort with all these people coming to watch. And one time, I asked Bramble to step up, and he puts his hands on my gloves, and then he kind of stands up, but his back legs aren't coming up. And I'm like, okay, in my head, what's going on? And I have a Madonna mic on. What's it called? Not a lapel, the headset mic.
Right. And, I like to call them Britney mics because, there
we go.
I try to be a little more relevant. But
yeah. That makes me sound so old now. Not that old. Anyways, I have my Britney mic on. And so he's still standing there. And in my head, I'm like, why is he standing up? But I'm still like educating the people, talking to them. And all of a sudden, his part comes up and he starts ejaculating on me. And
this is why her podcast is explicit, friends.
This story has not come up on my podcast, but he was doing that. And oh my gosh, I don't know what my face was doing, but I had to try so hard not to burst up laughing because there's kids in the audience. And I was like, so I pulled my hands away real quick because I'm like, I don't know if I should talk about this in front of the kids. And so I just kind of left it alone, let him there. And then once he was away after the show, this is the funny part. Some lady comes up to me and she was like, oh, that was such a great show. Oh, by the way, I saw him pee on you. And all I did was smile. And I was like, uh-huh.
That's awesome. And by the way, friends, that's how you know you are talking to someone who has worked with animals a long time, because the story starts off with a porcupine ejaculated on me. And then she says, now here comes the funny part.
Oh my God. I have another porcupine ejaculation story. This one's not mine, though.
What the hell did you just say to me? What? That's not even what? Oh my God. Okay, so let's hear porcupine ejaculation story number 2.
I'm gonna not say my friend's name because
Fair.
this friend, I won't even say the gender because I might accidentally later on because they don't like this story at all. In fact, if it was their weight, no one would know about this. So this is I won't even say the zoo. So they walk in. This was a prehensile tail porcupine. They walk in to do a live check because every morning you got to live check them. And so they walk in and they're looking for Max, the prehensile tail porcupine. Can't find him. Kind of stands up, looks into this little like higher perch, and then right in the eyes.
Oh no!
The thing is, no one would have known about this, but they close up the enclosure. They go into the kitchen where the eye wash station is. They're washing their eyes out. And then in comes our lead keeper, and they're like, what happened? And they're like, I don't want to tell you. And our lead's like, no, you have to tell me because you're using the eye wash station. I need to know what happened. And they're like, all right, Max just in my face. So if it was there, no one know about it, but
Amazing.
I love that story so much.
That is so good.
I'm like, you should tell the story to everyone. They're like, no.
See, and this is why I have a movement going. I don't know if you've heard of this yet, but I encourage keepers to show animals porn because then they would learn nice things like that. That is considered rude. No, I'm kidding. Wow, this episode is getting wildly off the rails.
I might introduce new things to them. I don't know if we want that.
It's like every time that I know an animal that needs sometimes animals like watching DVDs and stuff, and it's always like Disney movies. No.
Oh my gosh, I'm just imagining apes now. Like,
oh God.
Oh my gosh. All right, if you think about the zoos, get it approved by everyone above you. Make sure your vet staff approves it. Probably PR too. Chances are they won't, but
PR would frown upon showing your animals porn is what I've taken away from this interview. So woo, all righty. So before we move on, do we have any other porcupine ejaculation stories? I just need to check. We're at 2 right now.
No.
Okay.
I mean, there's plenty more, but that's all we're sharing.
Amazing. All right. So I have a question before we move on from the living desert. Yeah. You in both the internship stuff that you're talking about and now at your first job and living desert, you said that you write shows and programs. And as a professional entertainer, I'm intrigued by this. Like, what goes into the thoughts of scripting that and how much work goes into it and how many, because you said basically you're doing it yourself. I assume you still need to get approval from PR, just like showing animals porn. And, but I'm curious, like what goes into writing a show and how much thought goes into it? How much time does it take? Who do you have to work with to do we need sound? Do we need different perching? Do we need, how does all of that get designed? Yeah,
that's a great question. There's a lot. I probably put a lot more thought into it because I love doing it. That's one of my favorite. I mean, I don't say my favorite part because the animals and educating, but I love writing shows. But the first thing I think about is, well, what animals do we have available? And so just think about our department. And so, if it's, bird show, you obviously just have birds. Or I guess some zoos don't like saying shows anymore. They like saying programs, I guess.
Yes, or training sessions.
Yeah, I like saying shows because it tricks the public to come in and then you got them hooked.
Yes, I actually agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with using terminology to get people in as long as the training in the show is good and done properly and all of that. But, I get both sides of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So then once we figure out what animals we have available, then you think about how big a staff you have to help per day. So does that mean you get a 1-speaker show, a 2-speaker show? And a lot of this also depends on who's behind the scenes. Because what you don't realize when you're watching the show is that, well, one person's talking and you have this hawk flying around. There's probably at least 1 or 2 staff members, possibly a handful of interns back there who are helping you out. So you have to think about what hands are on deck to help you. And, that also depends on what animals you're using. So if you have birds, sometimes you need specific trainers, especially if they have a better relationship with certain birds, or you need someone to handle that animal. So if it's a big snake, like a red-tailed boa, you got to have somebody who can hold a big snake and bring it out. or someone who can train an armadillo on stage. So I just smacked my microphone.
We're professionals, folks.
Yes, we are. And so once you have like what animals, you need to think about what behaviors do you want to elicit and have or be shown. And so with that, though, while you're doing all this, you also need to think, what's the message? What's the message that you want? That's probably the most important thing because, you know, some shows I go to that I've seen is just, or even like on TV, you're like, here's a hawk. Watch it fly. They live to be 30 years old. Their nest looks here. They have this many eggs. It's just generic facts. And like, it's really hard to remember that. And so I always try to make it fun, entertaining, exciting. And you don't want to just bombard them with facts because that's the stuff they can ask at the end. And they don't remember that half the time anyways. Like, oh, how many eggs does it lays? Nobody remembers that unless they're really invested. So with that, you got to have to like tie all that in together. And so whatever your message is, you can have like characters. It depends. Like the shows I wrote were usually aimed toward younger audiences. So it needed to be a lot more like flamboyant and exciting. Versus, because especially with the smaller kids, you usually have like lizards or snakes or even like a cockroach. So it's harder to see. So it's the person's job on stage, who we can call them an actor at this point, to grab the audience's attention. Versus when you think about like bird shows or dolphin shows, those animals are just big and flashy. They kind of already grab the audience. So that also helps you determine how silly of writing you're going to be and how over the top of acting you're going to be. So like I would do the kids show and I would be like over the top crazy, kind of like I'm a Wiggle / Sesame Street or whatever you want to say, Disney Channel craziness. And then, but if I did the bird show, I'd still be pretty crazy because I want, there's still kids there. But
and because you're clearly crazy.
Only a little bit.
No, but I do think, all joking aside, it is important to have your personality shine through. I think that's an important part of it.
Well, that's part of the reason how it like helps relate people. Like, I'm sure you've seen it, like, think about professors you've had who are just like very monotone and boring, and it's very hard to learn from that. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm teaching, whether it's, teaching a bunch of kids about animals, doing my podcast, or else coach soccer, so any of that, I try to think about the professors and teachers that like I learned from. Like what about them gathered my attention, and what about it taught me this stuff? And that's what I bring into my teaching. That's
awesome. That makes sense. So how do you then partner with like okay, so you write a show, right? So you've thought through everything that you just said, and you come up with your message, and you have your animals, and you figure out your behaviors and all of that, and you script something, and then how do you turn it into a reality? All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Animals are taking center stage in research, not just as objects for human benefit, but as beings with rich histories and geographies. Join me, Claudia Herzenfelder, on the Animal Turn podcast as I interview leading scholars about emerging ideas and concepts in animal studies. Each season delves into a unique theme, revealing how concepts intertwine or diverge, and this kind of discussion encourages a deeper reflection about animals and their broader contexts. So far, the podcast has considered themes as wide-ranging as law, politics, sound, the urban, and biosecurity. If you are interested in animals and unpacking the ways we know them, find the Animal Turn podcast wherever you listen.
Well, again, we do have to get it approved, obviously. So usually that kind of just goes to like whoever my boss is at the time. They kind of look over it. And a lot of times, too, I'll talk to like the other people who would be performing the show and being like, is this character doable for you? Is this doable for you? Does this make sense? Because part of it, too, like you said, we want to bring their personality in there. So they all have to like kind of change it as they will. But also with this kids show, usually there's more sound effects or noises and stuff. So a little bit more like prop work, I guess. I forgot what it's called, like a set person backstage who kind of has to like push buttons, release animals.
Yeah, like a stage manager.
That's the word, stage manager.
I do this for a living, so you know.
Yeah, you got it. Perfect. So we do have to talk with like our multimedia department and IT department sometimes to get like the sound system working. Like, does it get tested every year? Make sure microphones work. and make sure the stage doesn't get flooded and ruin your equipment, because that happens sometimes.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'm just laughing because you say check the sound equipment once a year. And again, as a performer, it's a once a day thing normally, but I hear you. I hear you.
Well, no. Like, we check it daily, but like before the season starts, we're like, hey, IT guys, come check this out.
Right. It's something I've mentioned this on here before, but a service I'd like to offer at some point to zoos, if I have some more downtime where I'm not drumming all the time, is to just go and be an audio engineer to check out. Because I go to these places and not only can you often not hear people, but like it's so obvious to me why. Like I'll be sitting in the center and I'll be like, why can't I hear what they're saying? And I'll look up and there will be a speaker pointing left and a speaker pointing right, and we're in the center, and I'm like, all right, let's talk about how sound works, friends.
Well, I think it's my theater background that makes me like so like why isn't this working? This needs to work. We have to. And like I would be like buddies with the person who actually knows how it works, and like, how do I fix this?
Right. That's because, really smart.
It was important to me. I wanted to sound good. We're representing the zoo, these animals, and ourselves. So it's like, let's make it count.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's really cool. Man, it's cool to think about all the collaboration that goes into that, though. That's really cool. So you left the living desert. Where did you go next?
Yeah, well, I was there for 5 years.
That's
a
good amount of time.
It was, and it was great because I ran that program, and then it came time when like I'm ready to move on and get more animal training experience. Since I was running that program, it kind of like that's kind of all I was doing, and I was like, I got away from the animals, so I want to train more. And so then I went to Zoo Atlanta. And
we love Zoo Atlanta on this podcast.
Yes.
I have often
you've had Danica Wolf here on multiple times.
Yeah, so you know my buddy Danica, huh?
Oh, yeah, I know Danica.
Oh, yeah. Danica and I recently hung out in Boston. She's living up there now.
Yeah.
And I was doing a show up there, and we hung out, and she took me and bought me cannolis, and I finally got to hang out with her person, Pat, who is an awesome dude.
Oh, yeah.
And we had so much fun. And I'll tell you what, if nothing else from this podcast had happened except for becoming friends with Danica and getting to hang out with her up in Boston and stuff, it would have been okay. But much more has happened, and that's cool too. But yeah, Danica is amazing. And Danica was my 4th episode. And Zoo Atlanta working with me and Rachel trusting me and all of that gave me so much credibility because it's such a good, real facility.
Yeah.
And so many people cared about Iggy. Our first episode was about their red panda that had passed there. Yeah. And so many people cared about Iggy that it also got in a ton more listeners than my first 3 had it up to that point. And I credit Zoo Atlanta, Rachel and Danica with a lot of the success that I've had, honestly.
Yeah, they're fantastic there. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it, but I'm not there anymore. But
right. So tell me about Zoo Atlanta. So why did you go to Atlanta? What took you all the way across the country?
Well, one thing that people who want to become zookeepers might not know is that you kind of need to be flexible about where you live. Like, you can't be too particular. Like, if you, like, oh, I'm going to work at San Diego. Well, San Diego, I believe, is union, and so they get paid well and may take a while for them to leave. Like, I grew up in Oregon, so I'm like, oh, Oregon Zoo. Like, they're union. Like, people don't quit willy-nilly, like, all the time. They get paid well. So you kind of have to be willing to move in order to get the experience that you need and that you want. So that was, that's part of it. But like I said earlier, I wanted more animal experience, like working, training with animals, because at the Living Desert, which, I had that great opportunity to run that program, but ultimately I was basically just kind of Vanna Whiting these animals around. I wasn't really like training them to the level that I wanted to. Right. Even though if I had more time, I could have, which is always like a zookeeper's thing. If I had more time, I'd train more, do more enrichment. And like, you would have to create the time, but it was hard since I was going to I went to like over 200 schools a year. So it was, or 200 programs a year. So it was a lot. Oh yeah, absolutely. So coming to Zoo Atlanta gave me more of the opportunity to train more. And I've got to train, so many. I got to train an alligator. Nice. I love alligators. Like, people just think they're like these like floating logs in the water. No, they are so smart. First, they're stinking cute, like baby alligators. Oh, they're like one of my favorite animals now. They're so cute. We had 3 of them, Hercules, Perseus, and Odysseus. Nice. And we were training them, and my goal was to have them run across the stage, which, it was a little challenging. Especially, here's why it was so challenging. Like, if you think about, like, your dog at home, you can train it all the time because dogs are warm-blooded. They have to eat all the time, so you have more opportunity to feed them. But alligators, they don't eat all the time. So even as a baby, they didn't eat all the time. So we had to kind of figure out when we could feed them and not overfeed them, make sure they're still motivated, but still getting enough food to grow. It was this really fine balance.
Oh, that's really interesting. I never thought of that. That's really cool.
Yeah. But was even more challenging, and this is why when you train animals, you should not only know the individual, but also the animal species itself, is that alligators have these little sensing on the bottom of their jaw. And when they're in the water, if something lands in the water, it creates like that ripple in the water. They can feel that vibration with those little bumps on their jaw. And that was really important. That was a critical, like, aha moment in our training. Because, like, we had the alligator go into a kennel. We drop a little, it's called crock chow. Looks like Cocoa Puffs, but it's
nice.
Not Cocoa Puffs. Do not eat it. I didn't taste it because it smelled like fish and smelled disgusting. I've tasted some food. This one I would not. You drop it in this dry kennel, and the alligator couldn't find it. All we did was add like an inch of water, drop the food in there, and then instantly the alligator was like, oh, food. I get it. You can reinforce me now.
Oh, that's so cool. And a weird animal fact.
Yeah. And they have really good hearing, too. They got little ear slits. Oh, I love them. I love alligators.
That's awesome. I can tell. That's so cool.
It did take a while to get him. I had to focus on one to get him to go across the stage. He didn't do it a whole lot just because we're not able to train him as much as the other animals because of his feeding schedule. But when he did go, it was amazing. And because you don't really get to see an alligator on land, especially in Atlanta. Usually, like, they go to Florida, they see them in the water just floating along. On land, though, you see the little feet kind of waddle back and forth. It was great.
That's awesome. Yeah, when I was in the Everglades, I was driving. It was actually on my way back from Zoo Miami when I was doing a gig down there. I just interviewed Ron McGill, and I was like, ooh, I want to go see an alligator in the wild. And so I was driving through the Everglades, and I just pulled over and went to the water that was right there. And I was like, this probably won't work. And sure enough, all the way across the water from me, and I was standing right by the shore, a gator was just, like you said, logging by, just drifting by. And I was like, that's so cool. Oh, I wish it was closer. And then I turned to my left, and there was one just right there, and it was gliding right past me.
Granted.
I was like, okay, wow, thanks for not killing me, friend. But yeah, it was very cool. They are really amazing animals.
Yeah, I wish they got more credit because being in the South, especially, gators have a different kind of a view. I mean, it's also a culture thing. Like, if you think about different, like guinea pigs, for example. Here, we love them as pets. People eat them in South America. So it's a cultural thing. People just view them differently. And I just wish people viewed alligators as this smart, intelligent, like, cute, amazing thing that they really are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so that was Zoo Atlanta, and that was one of your animals there. And then, so, like, you're not a keeper anymore. What led to that decision?
Well, it was not an easy decision. It was, I took a lot of time, thought about it, but ultimately, a lot of it had to do with I wasn't educating people because of COVID anymore, and that's really what I wanted to do. And also, this is something I feel like this is going to, like, I don't put a bad image on certain people in zoos, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want to say every person at the zoo, every zoo who works with animals loves them so much, are excellent trainers. But I was having issues with my manager. I don't know if that's, but
no, look, I actually disagree with what you just said. I'm going to be brutally honest here. I don't think everybody that works at a zoo is there for the right reasons and loves animals. And I think that they get ferreted out pretty quickly. But I also think the other thing that happens a lot is as people move up in the ranks and stuff and are spending less time with animals, every once in a while, I think 97% of the people are exactly what you said. But you'll have bad entities anywhere you go. And I think that's valid. And I think it can even be not just like a bad person. It can just be
that's also why it was so hard for
me
me to bring up. Yeah. Well, also, like, one thing I see a lot in the zoo world, not just like some of the managers I've had in the past, because I've had plenty of managers, whether it was at the zoo or not, who, they got there because they have they're excellent. They're great at their job. You know, as far as like in the zoo world, usually they're excellent animal trainers. But they don't have that people aspect. As a manager, you need to have that person connection. You need to uplift, encourage, empower your staff, which I wasn't getting, and I needed that, especially during this COVID time. And that's why it was so hard for me to make this decision. But ultimately, at the end of the day, and I feel like Simone Biles at this point, like I had to think about myself and my mental health and what was best for me. And I took a long bath. I popped on like some of my Casey Musgraves, and I thought really hard, really long. And I was like, is this really what I want to do? And at the end, I was like, yes, I have to do this right now. And it was so hard. And I mean, my roommate still works at the zoo. My best friends are at the zoo, and I love the zoo so much. And I love everyone there. It's just, this was my journey. This is where I had to go. I just wish that zoos today are helping managers become more people oriented, so they can help encourage their staff members to be the best they can be, because that's what a leader does. And I think that's what we need.
So I agree. And leadership is a huge topic on this podcast, and something that I'm really passionate about, because I am a leader. I have lots of various roles that make me do that on the road and stuff. And I've always been passionate about leadership ever since I was a kid, and wanted to be like a Boy Scout leader, back when I was in my troop. And I think that, have you ever heard of the Peter Principle?
I don't think so.
Okay, we're going to be real nerdy right now.
Yeah.
So there's a thing in leadership, in management really as well, called the Peter Principle. And it is a point that gets made a lot that says, basically, here's what happens. We'll take this out of animals, we'll take it out of music, let's talk about a software engineer, right?
There we go.
So you start out and you are a software engineer, and you are the best damn software engineer that this company has ever had. But of course, there's seniority. So you start off as a software engineer 3. They quickly realize that you're doing well, so they move you up to a software engineer 2, and then you get promoted to software engineer 1, and then you get a raise, and then you get another raise. But at some point, the company is going to say, we don't care how good you are. We don't care that you are the best we've ever had. We can't pay you more than 120 grand a year or whatever. Managers start at 150. So your only way to get ahead in life is to then either leave there for another company where you might have to start off at the bottom or struggle with new people or whatever, or become a manager. Now, the skills that make you a good software engineer do not make you a good manager automatically. And in fact, with a lot of roles like possibly zookeeping, especially in the non-educational side, and like software engineering and stuff, make you a bad manager. You've spent a lot of time. The more time you spend with a computer, the less time you're spending with people. But because you're the best programmer, you're going to get the promotion. And because you want to get ahead in life, you're going to take it. And so the Peter Principle basically says that people raise up to a position that they are no longer good at, and then either get fired or do a bad job and get dropped back and feel bad and end up going to different companies. So companies constantly lose the retention of their best employees because of this principle. Whereas if you would just keep giving raises and keep finding ways to support the person in the job they're good at, it's a real interesting
that all
principle.
Ties back. This is also why I'm probably a little bitter about it, is because in the animal field, you've talked about positive reinforcement on this all the time, right? So like, animal as a zoo field, you understand that. You understand positive reinforcement. You apply it every day to your animals, but yet it doesn't translate to humans, to their staff. And that's one thing I wish it would help everyone, and animals too, because if your staff is happy, the animals will be happy, your guests will be happy, the world will be happy. So it's a little thing, but it has to start somewhere. And it's just, take the positive reinforcement you apply to the animals, apply it to not just your staff, even if you're not a manager, apply it to the people around you.
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
What if I told you scientists discovered 100 new species in the deep ocean?
Why did crocodiles survive extinction?
Megalodon. How did it go extinct?
Hey, it's me, Forrest Galante, wildlife biologist. You might know me from Joe Rogan's podcast or my various TV shows like Extinct or Alive and Shark Week. Join me and my friends as we dive into the wild world of animal anomalies and everything wildlife. Don't miss out. Click here to uncover these mind-blowing animal mysteries.
So I'm going to throw it back at you a little bit then. You clearly seem to have a lot of opinions on this, and you clearly seem to have the type of personality that would make you a good leader. So by stepping away from the field to protect your own mental health, you did the right thing. But do you think there's anything that you can do at some point to either re-enter the field or just work with people in the field to make that situation better?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we all have those like daydreams you kind of fantasize about, like, oh, I could do this or this. I could have a TED talk on this. Just the follow through and the commitment towards it, really. But right now I have a different journey. Maybe one day I'll get there because it would help out a whole lot. I mean, and right now I think the zoo I think the whole world needs that kind of like positive reinforcement, though, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And it's so easy to not. I have a puppy right now and am using positive reinforcement training. And it's so challenging sometimes to know that I could take a shortcut and go negative and get a quicker result, but a worse overall. Yeah. It is challenging in the moment, and I'm patient, but no, I totally respect that. That's cool. All right. Well, I've enjoyed hearing about your journey, and I guess it's kind of the end here. So let's talk about, do you have any conservation organizations that you would like to give a shout out to?
Well, I don't have a specific one because I thought about this, but ultimately when I think about like people who want to donate, but don't have any money, but still want to help out, there's actually a really easy, great way to do this. And you can still like kind of be involved. Just go to a zoo, go to an aquarium, go to a state park, a national park, or the museum. And even if you're just paying for that one day admission or membership, you're not only are you getting an experience, but you're also helping that facility create and promote conservation. And by you going to, that instills a nice little spark in you. And then you're passionate about the animal or tree, whatever it is you happen to fall in love with, and you pass it on to people around you. And then from there, they have a new spark, then they go to the zoo, and so on. It's like this domino effect. So it's not just one place. So wherever you are, whether you're here in Atlanta or Philly or California or Russia, go to the zoo near you and support it that way.
I love it. That is such a great message. And folks, if you want to look into that, that is the Red Panda Network that she said she is promoting. redpandanetwork.org. No, I kid. That is honestly a great message. And I mean, literally, if you listen to the end of the credits, which I doubt anyone does, but if you do, I end every episode by saying, now stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. So I'm all about that life. And that brings us to not the porcupine ejaculation story, which doesn't have its own song yet.
Not yet.
But it's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show, but there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story. Hit me.
Oh, I thought about this because I don't have a good poop story.
Poop story.
But I have some skills about poop.
Okay, let's hear your poop skills.
Well, I'm very good at catching poop in the air. Here's an example. I had an owl on my glove at on the news, and they had this nice carpet. And when you work with an owl for long enough for a bird, you know when they're getting ready to expel their business. And I saw this bird kind of squatting down, and I was like, uh-oh, this is nice carpet. I gotta, and just like a ninja, whoosh-ah! Caught. Nobody even saw it, but I'm standing there with this poop in my hand.
Nice.
And my second poop skill is at Zoo Atlanta, we have the reptile room. And in there we have snakes, lizards, tortoises. And walking in the room, I could walk in that room and I could smell a poop and I could tell you which animal pooped that poop. Because we had an eastern indigo snake named Cooper who, if you don't know what an indigo snake is, they're beautiful black snakes. So they're endangered too. They're wonderful. And Cooper was the coolest snake. He's my favorite snake in the whole world. He passed away, unfortunately. But he, as an indigo snake, they have a higher metabolism, so they poop more and it's runnier. So you walk in there, you kind of get this not a great smell. Like most carnivores don't have that good a smell because they're eating other animals and it goes to the digestion, comes out, doesn't smell as good. So his smell, I could identify his smell perfectly. Also, lizard smell, poop smell has a different odor than tortoise smell. And depending on which tortoise it is or turtle, it's got a little bit different smell too. So I can identify reptile poop smell from the smell alone. So
Nice.
there's my next. That'll be on my resume.
I was
go
going to
back
say,
to the
yeah,
zoo world.
yeah. When I don't know about the real world, but in the entertainment industry, at the bottom of your resume, you put special skills, and it's just like stuff that you can do. And
I had that on my dating profile for a while, and I'm still single, by the way. So maybe that wasn't helping.
Yeah. We should create a zoo dating app for like zookeepers and animal people.
I don't know. Most people at the zoo, they're either married or they're gay or they're married.
Gay people are allowed to date. Hell, gay people are allowed to be married. They
are. But when you're a single straight girl, you gotta slim pickings in the zoo world.
Fair. In the entertainment industry, at least in the theater world where I work, if you are a male who is straight and single,
you get nabbed up pretty quick.
They call you a unicorn. It's literally a term that you will literally hear someone be like, "Oh yeah, he's a unicorn," and that's what that means. So yeah, cool, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This is so much fun.
Yeah, and one more time, tell everyone where they can check out your podcast.
Well, if you're listening to this podcast now, you can just go to the little search engine, type in Weird Animal Facts Explicit. You can find me there, or any other podcasting service. We're also on Instagram at WAF Podcast, and that's the same handle for TikTok as well. So check it out.
Awesome. Love it. Thanks. So there you have it, folks. That's Deidre and I being goofy as heck and having a lot of fun doing it. Don't forget that you can check out the Weird Animal Facts podcast on any podcast app, including the one you're listening to right now. And now that you're almost done with this episode, you can go listen to me on the most recent episode, spouting off random stuff about red pandas. You're shocked. I know. Anyway, also make sure that you're following along at WAF Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. And while you're following things, I'd like to remind you that you can follow Rossifari on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Rossifari, on TikTok at Rossifari Pod, and you can support the pod by visiting patreon.com/Rossifari, like my good friend Laura Shank, who is my Red Panda level patron. Thanks, Laura. And thank you to everyone else who is a different level patron. I appreciate you all so much. All right, y'all. Remember, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Vesley Gross. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.